Hey, Grampian Nation. Shawn Motor Walsh is coming on board with the Grampian. And as you noticed, he's got a call sign, so he must be a pilot. An F-16 pilot with 20 years of experience. Hang on.
In 2013, I coined the name Grampian, and I gave it to your host, Jim Tracy.
Hey, Shawn Motor Walsh. Welcome to the Grampian, man. How are you?
Hey, Jim, thanks for inviting me on. I'm a fan of your show and I'm excited to be here.
Oh, I'm a fanboy too, man. You've got a following of like 700,000. So old guys want to grow up and be like you. So you spent 20 years in the United States Air Force, not doing Navy landings except for maybe a few times. And you flew the venerable Fighting Falcon. Tell us about your military experience. What drew you to serve our country?
Well, my uncle was a pilot in the Air Force and he used to tell me stories and it sounded so cool. And when I was a kid growing up, I was one of 7 kids. My dad was a carpenter. I wanted to go to college, but didn't really know how I would afford it. And so I looked into Air Force ROTC and I was fortunate to get a scholarship out of high school, 4-year ROTC scholarship. So that was kind of like, it was my ticket to go get a degree and to whatever came after that. So when I first set out, I didn't necessarily say like, I want to be a fighter pilot. I just said, I want to do the next thing and I want to go to college and, get better education. I'll serve. When you first commit to that sort of a degree, it's just a 4-year commitment. And I studied civil engineering. And with that, if I had been a civil engineer in the Air Force, it would have been a 4-year commitment. And I thought this will be great. College is paid for. If I don't get a pilot slot, no worries, I'll do engineering. And that's, I think, kind of always been my approach to each level of training and what the next challenge was is I give it 100%, but I have kind of a fallback where it's okay. If it doesn't work out, no worries. This is going to be awesome. And I really, yeah, I think the mentality that you go into it with makes a lot of difference to the outcome in your experience. So yeah, I flew, went to Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in Daytona Beach, Florida. And I was hanging out around a lot of pilots and it looked fun. After my degree, I got a pilot slot. I went to NJEP, which is Euro-NATO Joint Jet Pilot Training in Texas. And from there, I flew the T-37 at one of the last few classes to fly the Tweet. So that dates me a little bit because everything now is the T-6. Then I flew T-38. And on drop night, I was fortunate enough to get my first choice, which was the F-16.
And that's awesome. Plus, you got Uncle Sam to pay for your college, which makes you way smarter than me.
And my flight training, which is probably more expensive than college.
Exactly. So one of the things that I listened to one of your shows on, and you talked about passion, and that passion isn't like it's where you end up. It's not where you start. You talked about practice and pursuit. Draw those lines together for our audience.
Yeah, you bet. I think I hear it a lot because I have kids who are getting to the age where people say, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I hear people a lot of times ask, what are you passionate about? And I guess it's kind of like my beef with that question is you don't know yet. When you're a kid, you don't know what you're passionate about. You might meet a teenager who loves to play basketball. Well, they didn't wake up or they weren't born loving basketball. Something along the way happened. They were influenced that way by, school or friends or family or whatever. I had a Michael Jordan poster on my wall and I love basketball. And those were all influences in my life. So you find your passion. It's not something you're born with. I believe that. And you can be passionate about more than one thing. I think that when you get out and try new things and you find something that you're interested in and you start dedicating time to it and you really, really pursue it, then you start to become passionate about it. And then with that passion, I think you later find purpose in what you're doing. Because that's the other question is what is your purpose, right? That's when you're young, everyone says, what do you want to be when you grow up? What are you passionate about? And then after you've been doing it for a while, it's what is your purpose? And I really think you find it along the way. I don't think you're necessarily born with it. And we're all born with skills and traits, things that we're better at or worse at. But I'm passionate about more than one thing. And I was not passionate about flying fighter jets until I did it and until I got good at it.
And practice also develops passion, but they used to say that practice makes perfect. And I think practice actually makes permanent, but perfect practice makes perfect. So, but that develops that passion at a higher level, doesn't it?
It does. It really does. And the more you pour into it, the more you get back out of it. That's kind of true of anything. What you put into it is what you get out of it. And when you practice, you get better. It becomes more fun. Like, I took a few golf lessons and I'm terrible. And it wasn't fun because I'm not good at golf. So I went back to playing basketball and tennis and things that I was better at. But if I had practiced more, I probably could get better. But yeah, it's your passion is derived out of that practice and what you develop.
With you, man, golf is a thief of time, and time is the commodity that we should value the most. So you are a retired F-16 fighter pilot, but you've turned into a CFO. Tell us how that happened.
So as I was approaching the end of my career, I was kind of looking at what's next for me. What am I passionate about? What do I want to do? Most of my friends were going to the airlines, and I think that's great. It's a fantastic career. They pay well, and a lot of people enjoy that. But it wasn't for me. I just knew that it just wasn't going to be for me. It felt like maybe trading one military boss for another. Tell me where to go and when to be there, and when I'm going to miss Christmas. And so I wanted to do something a little different. And over the course of my career, I had become passionate about finance and investing and real estate and various things in that kind of genre. And so I went back to school. I went to Columbia Business School for their CFO program. The Air Force sent me to King's College in London to get a master's degree in strategic studies there. And that whole concept of like having strategy and applying it to finance was really appealing to me. I love taking a problem and fast forward 20 years and then work it back to today and see how am I going to get there from here. And that kind of led me down the path of, I think this is what a CFO does. So that's why I went to the Columbia program for CFOs and really enjoyed it.
You also have a deeper purpose in that you have helped a bunch of military families and veterans become more financially independent or financially free while they're still engaged in the service, which isn't a notoriously high-paying occupation.
Yeah. And you mentioned early that I have a social media following. The reason I started making social media videos, it was right at the end of just before I retired. And I got a lot of crap from my friends in the squadron for making the video. But I wanted to write a book, and I wanted to talk about what would I tell myself when I was 18 or 20 entering the service if I could go back and give advice. What would I say? And so I started working on this book, and it became this book on financial freedom and what does it mean and how do you get there, or how did I get there? And so my first month of making social media videos, I talked about financial freedom. And they got like 15 views. And I think it was my mom just watched it 15 times. Like nobody cared. Nobody wanted to listen. And then I was talking with a friend who does this, and I had tried to get a book deal, and they told me no. And they said, you have to have a social media following in this day and age if you want a book deal. And I said, all right, I'll make social media videos. I can do that. Nobody watched them. And then somebody said, why don't you talk about flying? And I was like, all right, I'll give it a try. And I did a video where I explained how I got the call sign motor, and it got 10 million views. And I was like, oh, okay. So that's what people want to hear about. So
pretty cool story, though. I got to tell you, it's a pretty cool story. Not real positive, but not real negative either. But
no, it's okay. There are a lot of call signs out there where people don't want to tell the story, and I don't mind telling mine. But that's what led me to making social media videos. And I did get a book deal. I turned in my manuscript a few weeks ago. It was a slog near the end, but it's exciting because I do want to impart this to, if you're 18 and joining the military right now, I can show you, it's a math problem. I can tell you with 99% accuracy, every dollar you're going to make for 20 years. And with that, I can show you how to be a millionaire in retirement. It's just a math problem. But if you don't start early when you're 18, if you wait until you're in your 30s to start, you're already so far behind the curve.
Exactly. That compounding interest adds up. So as long as we got that out of you, tell us how you got the name Motor. A call sign is your affectionate name, but it's also an operational name for you folks who are not aviation or military cognizant. But how did you come by Motor?
I was a lieutenant on my first assignment in Japan. which is normally when most people get their call sign as their first assignment. It's usually tied, they try to tie it to something flying related, sometimes and usually something stupid you did or whatever. We like acronyms. So MOTOR stands for Magnum on the Only Runway. I was out flying. It was actually one of my first or second sortie after being fully combat mission ready. So a CMR pilot is after you've gone through pilot training, you've gone through F-16 training, you get to your unit and you go through combat mission ready training. It's kind of your last step before the gloves come off and you are ready for combat and they say you're an F-16 pilot. So I had finished my CMR a few days earlier and I was on this night mission and I was carrying HARM missiles. HARM is the high-speed anti-radiation missile. They take out, surface-to-air missile sites. This thing is like a telephone pole. It's a 1,000-pound air-to-ground missile. I'm carrying 2 of them on the F-16, and we're flying in an exercise with the Japanese Ground Self-Defense Force. They're defending the coast, and we're attacking the coast, and we're both getting training out of this exercise. And I come back into land. I'm number 4 in the formation. I believe I was the last landing of the night. It's 10 o'clock at night. And I touch down, we aero brake to about 100 knots, and then I lower the nose, and when I hit the brakes, the missile keeps going off my airplane. And I notice it because I just see fire and sparks out of the corner of my eye, and it's dark. I don't know what's going on. I look down, and this missile is sliding along next to me, just a few feet away from me. And I'm just in shock. I'm like, what just happened? But it starts moving underneath my airplane. If you've ever sat in the cockpit of the F-16, you can see a few feet down, but you can't see underneath yourself, obviously. And it starts going underneath, and it's huge. And I think, man, this thing's going to collapse my gear. So I'm max braking, full F stick, full brakes, and the missile pulls out in front of me and then catches the cable on the runway. There's a cable, it's about 2,000 feet from the end of the runway. It hits the cable, and it flips in the air, tumbling, and then just smashes on the runway in front of me as I come to a full stop. And I was just like, what just happened? The tower controller is the Japanese controller. He is screaming in the radio, and he's yelling, fire and brakey, because that's what they would say, fire and brakey. He's saying it over and over again. And I'm just looking around like, my brakes are not on fire, I don't think. But that was crazy. And then shut down the runway for probably 12 hours. The fire department came out. The Japanese were not happy about that, but it was just it was ruled not my fault. The little holdback pin failed. The thing was 25 years old, and it eventually just wore down and it failed. Yeah.
Is there an arresting cable on the runway?
Something interesting about making social media videos is you say something in telling a story, and then social media, there's a lot of negativity. I stay out of that. But people will go, you're lying. Only the Navy has cables. That's people's reaction. And it's like, oh. But then you start to realize that there's so much you take for granted, like simple knowledge that you just gained over the years of doing it. So in my videos, I try to treat it like I'm teaching my 10 or 12-year-old kids something about the airplane. And I try to keep it really simple. So you'll see in the comments, a lot of times people will be like, you forgot to add Bernoulli's equation to the lift formula or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, it's okay. I'm explaining it to my 10 or 12-year-old. But no, I didn't realize this, but yeah, people don't know, but there are cables on pretty much every Air Force runway. The F-16 has a hook on it. It's for emergency. That thing does not like to slow down. And so if you're coming into land and you have a brake malfunction, a tire malfunction, a gear malfunction, even electrical, if you've lost battery power, you will use your hook and catch the cable. And so I think most, I can't speak for all runways. Everyone that I ever flew off of had 4 cables on it, one in each overrun, and then another 2 about 1,500 to 2,000 feet down the runway. And they drop the ones on the approach end usually, or disconnect them. And they keep 2 in either direction, depending which way you're landing on the runway.
That's awesome.
And I forgot the last detail. So Magnum on the only runway, when you shoot a harm in combat, you call Magnum with a bearing, because this thing comes off like a freight train. It climbs into the bososphere, and then it comes down on its target. And so you want everyone to know, they know where the bad guys are generally, and you want them to know where that missile is coming from, because it doesn't care if someone's in its way. You just got to get out of its way. So you'll say Magnum bearing 270. So when they named me, that Friday night was the naming ceremony. It was already in place. And I got Magnum on the only runway, so motor.
Wait, was that? What runway number? You got to remember that.
Oh, I don't remember. I can look it up, but it's
Look it up now. Magnum bearing, runway head.
yeah, it was in the Air Force end of year safety magazine, but it said pilot was not at fault. So yeah, that's a Class B mishap too, because those missiles are expensive.
No kidding. No kidding. So, how in the world did you get from 15 times your mom watching your video to 700,000 followers?
Now, I started explaining things like we just did, and then I'd make a video, and people would ask great questions, things I didn't think to explain, like cables on the runway, and that question was asked. So I made another video about cables on the runway, and then people liked it, and they asked more questions, and so I answered those questions. And next thing you know, I have a lot of people asking questions about flying fighters. Obviously, I keep it all unclassified, and I stay away from tactics, techniques, and procedures. People always ask about that stuff, and that's okay. I don't answer it. And there's always one or two people that say, "Why are you telling this to our enemies?" And it's like, I'm talking about a cable on the runway. You can see it on Google Earth. You can look it up. So yeah, I stay away from that stuff, but I mostly answer questions. I about once a week I try to drop in a video on financial freedom, because the other part of that, writing this book and trying to talk to my 18-year-old version of myself is realizing, would I have listened? And the short answer is no. Somebody was like, I'm sure somebody probably told me what I should and shouldn't do, or recommendations on investing and the future. But how do I appeal to my 18-year-old version of myself and say, what would have gotten me to listen? And I think some cool flying stories. And then, oh, by the way, start investing early.
Think about what you're doing, right? So you were also an F-16 evaluator pilot. So you're talking about are you riding in a two-seater now? Are you riding alongside someone, or how are you evaluating a pilot?
So a little bit of both. Generally speaking, as an instructor and an evaluator in a single seat airplane, you are following the other person and evaluating them from your airplane. Occasionally in the F-16, you would fly in the back seat as an evaluator, but nobody really likes that, the evaluator or the person being evaluated. So you develop, we call it SA, situational awareness. And the best description I ever heard, it's not my unique thought, but when you're a wingman, your SA is like a bubble that just barely is around your airplane. And the more tasks you get, the busier you get, that bubble shrinks down to just your cockpit. Sometimes it's just your helmet, and then your helmet's on fire. When you become a flight lead, your SA bubble expands to include your wingman and yourself. And you start to have not only awareness of your jet, but awareness of what your wingman is doing and what they should be doing. And then when you go on to become a four-ship flight lead and later an instructor pilot, your SA bubble expands to your whole four-ship, but then it also expands to the enemy and the follow-on forces. And then as an instructor and later an evaluator pilot, your SA bubble expands to include the entire battle space, also as a mission commander. But you're also able to see the nuance in what the other people are doing and understand the kind of peel it back like an onion and see, why did they do this? What was going on, both in their brain and their cockpit, and break down every task and every mistake that we make to, was it a game plan error, an execution error? Sometimes we just make mistakes. Like, I meant to push this button, but I pushed that button. We're human. It happens. And sometimes I meant to push that button. I did push that button and it didn't work. So we try to break everything down and evaluate our errors to get better on every sortie.
I had a flight instructor one time, and he was pretty sharp in terms of his responses to me. And I would be flying along and doing something. He would say, "Why did you do that?" And I would be like, "I don't know." Because I figure when I get in trouble, I need to push buttons, which is a bad idea, folks. You don't do that when you get a little bit more seasoning.
I have had a few instructors like that as well. I would do that when it was necessary, but my style was a little bit more like, give people enough rope to, as long as it's not going to risk life or limb, go ahead, try it. See what happens. I know what's about to happen. You're about to roll inverted and pull towards the ground, but as long as we're not close to the ground, go ahead, give it a try, see what happens. That was kind of my approach to instructing. It's my approach to parenting too.
Awesome. My flight instructor, or no, my flight instructor, my medical examiner for my flight medical was also a pilot, and he was also a Air Force pilot, and and a physician, and he became the flight surgeon for, I think, down in Arizona. Anyway, he kept asking the guys. He says, "What, you guys don't seem like you want to fly with me," because he would go with them in the F-16, and he would be in the back seat of the F-16, and he was really distressed because he felt like they were rejecting him. And one of the guys came to him and he said, "Nobody likes driving the station wagon." Is that a thing?
It is for a number of different reasons. So our D model F-16s are not combat coded. Most of the time, that's transparent. It doesn't really matter. But when we deploy to combat, we don't bring two-seaters with us. They're training variants. The cockpit is 3 inches narrower because they made the nose longer. And it may not seem like much, but when you get in the F-16, it's like you're putting on a pair of pants. Like you are snug in there. And the D model, the two-seater, is 3 inches narrower. So you feel the difference when you're in the airplane, slightly less. You have less fuel because you substituted a person for an extra fuel tank back there, where there used to be. Yeah, and so they took the the fuselage fuel tank, and they cut it basically in half to make room for that seat. And so there are a lot of nuances about the airplane, but also when you're a single seat pilot, single seat fighter pilot, you don't want somebody else talking to you or telling you what to do. Like, you're in charge, you're the mayor of Cockpit City, and you don't want anyone else telling you what to do or judging you from the back seat.
So, you went from Embry-Riddle to the Air Force, and then you have come back at Embry to be an adjunct instructor. What do you teach and train there?
So I did one assignment in the middle of my career where I went and did remotely piloted airplanes, RPAs or UAVs, whatever you want to call them. And it was interesting. I did a little bit of time in the MQ-1, MQ-9, and then I did some time in the RQ-170. And so coming out of that, I had also gotten a master's degree from Embry-Riddle in aeronautical science. And one of the thesis that I did basically for the master's degree was on the future use of unmanned systems. And this was 2010, probably. So, RPAs, UAVs, all of that is very new. And so I had experience. I had done an assignment. I was not, then I went back to the F-16. And I had also written about it and done some academic study on the future use of unmanned systems. And so they invited me to teach back at Embry-Riddle specifically on that topic. And so, I really enjoyed it. I think like my nature is kind of, I'm kind of a teacher at heart, an instructor in the F-16. My videos online and, how I parent my kids. It's really like my nature is to be a teacher. And I really enjoed it. I taught for probably 2 or 3 years, various classes for Embry-Riddle. And I haven't done it in a while, but maybe I'll call them again. That was fun.
So, looking back now with 15 years more onto that, when you look out in the future, and I'm saying, "Hey, Motor, give me your crystal ball for UAVs or unmanned aerial vehicles," what does that look like from a military perspective? Do you think there's a huge future there?
I do. People ask this all the time, and I've been debating how I'm going to make this video and keep it short enough for social media, not be an hour-long video. I see, and especially the war in Ukraine has really revolutionized the use of unmanned systems. And there are so many purposes and uses now that in the future, I do think the person in the cockpit will become mostly obsolete. I love the airplane, and I don't think it's tomorrow. I don't think it's anytime soon. And it depends on the type of conflict you're fighting. My generation fought the global war on terror, where we did 20 years of close air support in a non-contested environment for the most part. This current conflicts that the U.S. is engaged in the Middle East, as well as other countries are engaged in, these are more of those, near peer kind of adversaries, more aerial combat, those sorts of things. But you can imagine a future where you take your F-16 out and you can't even get into the target area because the airspace is saturated with these small drones that would take down a fighter jet. And so there are a lot of different uses, and we've already seen Ukraine do some really incredible stuff and really punch above their weight class with.
With fiber attached to drones, man, it's crazy.
Yep. Yep. And so I think that as this continues to evolve, it really is the future of the air war, at least. I think we'll have fighter pilots for a long time to come. It's just like, you're flying, if you go buy a new, I went and test flew the Epic 1000 recently. It's an awesome.
Bend, Oregon.
Yes, and Bend. I love that airplane. It's the closest thing to flying an F-16 in the GA world that I have flown. I've climbed out at 4,000 feet per minute. But you can pretty much take off, hit a button, and do nothing until you land at your destination. The technology is there to do this on airliners, to do this in GA airplanes. Like, we could have unmanned airplanes with people in them. But I think we are decades, generations from before we say we don't need a pilot in the
from the public too. You're in the Phoenix area. Do you would you get in a Waymo?
Yeah,
That's all over Phoenix and Scottsdale and places like that. Have you been in one?
And Phoenix was, I think it was the first major city to allow it. And so they're normal here now. We've been seeing them for probably 5 years. During COVID was when they started driving them. They've been approved to go on the highway now, and they're doing testing with that. And, I think flying cars are the next thing that a good friend of mine is a test pilot for one of the flying car companies. And he called me last week and asked me if I want to get on the list for one of the flying cars. And yeah, I think it's a really unique thing that you could be an early adopter. If I were to get one right now, there are so many things you just don't know. If you are hovering 2 feet off the ground, but you're in Class Bravo airspace, are you in the airspace? What if you put your foot out and put it on the ground? Are you now a car? So I think there's still a lot that we haven't uncovered. And so it's a really interesting area.
Yeah. So you talked about on one of your videos, you talked about being kind of lonely up in a night flight or something like that. And there's a lot of people out there who are single pilot operations, myself included. And sometimes it feels like you're all alone and it gets a little uneasy. Have you experienced that?
I definitely have. One story comes to mind, and it was crossing the ocean at night, and there's nothing. There's not even lights. There might be like one boat way off in the distance. You have your formation. You're flying off the wing of a tanker, but in your airplane, it's just you, and it's silent. And there are moments where it's really beautiful, especially in Arizona, flying over the desert at night on a clear sky with NVGs. If you get the chance to fly with NVGs, it's incredible. You think you see a lot of stars in Bend, Oregon. Well, put on NVGs and you see a trillion stars. It's incredible.
Confirm or deny that I have.
Yeah. So you're flying there. The F-16 has got a bubble canopy, right? So you've got unobstructed view, and you just recline back. The seat's already reclined 30 degrees. You just kind of lay back and look at the sky, and you're like, wow, this is it. It fills you with wonder and awe on the universe. But that same feeling, that same moment can kind of make you feel very alone and very aware of your humanity. My pink butt here on this machine is the only thing. This engine spinning is the only thing keeping me out of the ocean as I cross the ocean. And I have a lot of faith in these machines.
Yeah. And it gives you a sense of how frail we really are and how fragile life really is, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that when there are now a bunch of these stargazing resorts that have been built all over the country. And I do think the more time you spend realizing how big the universe is, the tinier it makes you feel and makes you, I don't know, I think for me, care a little more about humanity as a whole.
I always find too, especially you talked about Bend or the Rocky Mountains or wherever there's not a lot of ground light coming up, the sense of there had to have been a creator, because you got time, space, and matter, and something bigger than time, space, and matter had to create this stuff. And it just gives me a grand idea of how big God really is.
Yeah, people ask the other one, that the question I get a lot, and I've done one video. I'm going to do another one, is on UFOs, or do I think there's other life? And I always tell people that to think that there is no other intelligent life, I think is the odds would be against it, right? So we're in the Milky Way galaxy. There's about 400 billion stars in it, and they say about 5 to 10% have planets in the zone of life. So that's 20 to 40 billion Earths just in the Milky Way. And right now, they estimate that there are over 2 trillion galaxies. And so that's 40 billion times 2 trillion Earths. And this is the only one with life. And if that's true, that's actually scarier, because we're not taking such good care of this little rock here. And if this really is the only place where life can exist, then we got to take good care of it. And if it's not, if it's in one other place, then it's probably in every place. But it just makes you realize how small it is here on Earth. And then in time, you mentioned time. I mean, technology has evolved so quickly, but humans have only been around like the tiny little sliver of time in the grand scheme of the universe. And so, yeah, it does make you just step back and stare and wonder at the universe.
I'm going to dive into some more of these aviation questions, because we've got a lot of people out there who don't understand aviation, and I want to give them a grasp. The language of flight confuses people. And when you talk to a tower or an approach or a center, it's a little bit different, but you guys take it to another level. Why do you do that?
We do. When you're orchestrating a large scale effort, like a large force exercise or a war, you need to have a lot of aircraft and a lot of people on the same frequency, because the speed of passing information is critical. And that's one of the reasons that now using data links like Link 16 is so effective, because you can pass information in a picture and everyone can get it at the same moment. But you still at times need to use the radio. And when you have 80 airplanes on the same frequency, there's not enough time for everybody to say what they want to say. And so we call it brevity comm, and that is brevity communications. We have an entire manual of brevity comm, and it's standardized across NATO. And so we use these brevity terms, so you can say one word and it means a whole definition. And so it's almost like a small dictionary for military and for fighter pilots that is next level above even what GA and regular aviation has. It's the same thing when you're on frequency. If you fly into LAX and you're on frequency and with LA Center leading in there, and everyone's just trying to say where they're at, what altitude, what's their clearance, and it's a busy radio frequency. Now take that, and people are shooting at you, and you're shooting back, and there's so much going on. You really need to be able to communicate in one word an entire paragraph. So that's the brevity comm that we use. And I have made a few videos of brevity comm, and every time I make one, I just get 50 more questions. I could probably just make an entire year-long series on brevity comm.
That you should go to YouTube and look up Shawn Walsh and his channel there. So the other important part about that is that when you say something, you're counting on everybody to understand it at the same time. That's why it's really critical to get you guys all on the same page, isn't it?
Absolutely, and not just Air Force pilots, because we often train with our squadron and with whoever's close to us. But when you go to war, you're not with, there's 3 squadrons at a base, let's say. You don't go to war with those 3 squadrons usually. You meet up in the theater with people from all over the world. And you might have Marine Corps pilots and Navy pilots and NATO pilots, and all different countries meet up in the same airspace at the same time to support each other. You have to, when I say something, I have to know that Marine Corps pilot and that Navy pilot and that NATO pilot all know what I mean when I say it, because we develop our own language with the people you fly with all the time, but you still have to standardize across all friendly allied nations.
Chair in Kenya, and he said, take the radio. And the approach controller started talking to me, and I just said, "No way, man, that's not English. I understand." Is that problematic when you're dealing with NATO pilots who are flying abreast of you?
Uh,
Sense?
I'll say it can be, but most of the time, that's why we train together. I did an assignment in Japan, as I mentioned. I also did an assignment in Korea. I have flown with a dozen NATO countries or more. And when we do these big exercises, the biggest one is red flag. And red flag is amazing. It is the closest thing to combat that you can get. It's a giant exercise. There are two locations, Las Vegas and Alaska, where they hold these red flag exercises. And every red flag I've ever done has had other countries participating. So sometimes it's, NATO countries, it might be a NATO flag. Sometimes it is allies from the Pacific. Sometimes it's only, Aussies, Brits, and Canadians, the ABCs, or, whatever. But every time I've done a red flag, there have been partner nations and other services who participated in the same red flag.
So you brought up Navy and Marines, and you can't get out of here without giving a little Air Force humor. Tell us what happens if you're an Air Force pilot and you land a little hard.
Yes. So we have a saying in the Air Force, when you're in pilot training, all your landings are graded, and they're graded by somebody in this called an RSU. I forget what it stands for, but it's a little building out next to the runway, and they're literally grading your landings. And we have a bunch of acronyms because there's so many planes landing and taking off all the time at pilot training that you're just jotting down acronyms. And on hard landing, there are things like pump, stick, and flare, hard landing, whatever. And then there's welcome aboard, sailor. And that is what we would say when somebody just plants the airplane. And you can tell once you've watched enough airplanes land when one just plants it on the runway, and you're like, ooh, you cringe a little, and you're like, he felt that one. And it happens. Sometimes you misjudge the flare. Sometimes there's a gust of wind, whatever. Even the best pilots in the world, you've been on an airline where you've greased it on the runway and you're like, oh, that was the best landing ever. It doesn't mean that's the most experienced pilot. It might have been lucky. But every pilot has a firm or a hard landing every now and then. But yeah, we would say welcome aboard, sailor.
My flight instructor, my jet instructor, who gave me a call sign just because that's what he does. He had 20 plus years Air Force and Air Force Reserves. He let me know what Navy landings were for and how, and every time I would perform one. So anyway,
yeah, we have a lot of good-natured ribbing between services, but we always come together and fly together. And I have a ton of respect for Navy and Marine Corps and all the other services, but we have some really good jokes amongst us as well. And so if you ever meet a Marine Corps pilot, ask him what his favorite flavor of crayon is.
And for those of you who don't know, Marines are crayon eaters. So, all right. Some of the things that I love take us away from piloting and more into life. Your favorite quote, watch your thoughts. They turn into words. Go ahead, finish that off for me.
Oh, you put me on the spot. The entire quote, it's kind of a long one, and I have it on my wall at home. But it's watch your thoughts, or they become your words. Watch your words, they become your actions. Watch your actions, they become your habits. Watch your habits, they become your character. And watch your character, it becomes your destiny, I think is the gist of it. I may have missed a line in there.
And no, you nailed it.
Great. So yeah, I proved it as my favorite quote. I love that because everything starts with a thought. And when you think through your life, everything you've done in life going on to become a fighter pilot, it began with a thought that I had to have somewhere along the way that this might be something I want to go do. And what you think about in your own mind becomes ingrained in who you are, and it comes out in your actions. And so if you have negative thoughts about yourself, like, oh man, I suck as a pilot. This was a terrible flight today. That's going to come out in how you fly the next time. And it's going to become part of who you are. But if you walk away from it, like, basketball again, and you ask Michael Jordan about all the shots he missed, and did he ever think about the shots he missed? And his answer was, why would I think about the shots I missed? I always thought I was going to make the next shot, or else why would I take it? And having that, the memory of a goldfish, I think that was Ted Lasso, and just going out and going, you know what? I make mistakes almost every day. I made mistakes on probably every sortie I ever flew. But if you just treat them as opportunities to get better, it's something I didn't know before, or an error I made that I knew better and still made a mistake. But if you reframe it in your mind as an opportunity to get better, and like, man, I got so much better today because this was my worst flight ever. And I would tell young lieutenants or people I was instructing when I was a squadron commander, I would talk about that. I would tell them, think back to the worst flight you've had this year. Like, think of that moment, that one flight that you're like, I just want this to end and I want to go home. This is horrible. I've screwed everything up. Do I even deserve to be here? And think about that. And then I want you to have gratitude for that flight, because it's impossible to hold the emotion of gratitude in your mind and also be upset. You can't be grateful and angry. You can't be grateful and down on yourself. It's impossible. And so if you have gratitude for that flight and you think, man, that flight sucked. I was horrible that day. And I'm so grateful for that, because since that day, I have gotten better. And every flight I've done since then has been better than that one was. And so that's kind of how I summarize that quote. And that's really my philosophy on flying and on life.
That's so cool, because every flight is a teacher, and that makes every flight a lesson. And if you can bring those lessons into your repertoire of things you don't want to do again, or things you might want to repeat, all of a sudden you become a better pilot with every flight, because you're treating it as an opportunity. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I would always tell the squadron that, especially as instructors, the most important flight, or the most important person in your flight is you, the instructor, because you also have to get better at instructing. Because if your student gets better, that's good, and your student is a little bit better. But if you get better, every student that you instruct after this is also going to get better. So it's an exponential growth for the unit. And every single sortie you do, if you don't get better in that sortie, what was the point of it? Like, you're just flying to burn holes in the sky. But if we each get better a little bit every day, it's compound interest. It's the same concept. If you start early. Yeah, go ahead.
Somebody who says we want to get 1% better every day. Well, that's 365% a year. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, but it's a never-ending strive for getting better. So another quote that I loved from you is, use things, not people. Love people, not things. Where did that come from?
I have a whole book of quotes that over the years I write them down, and I have them in various places, in my closet or on the wall, or I just keep them in a notebook. And some of them really, really stood out to me over the years. And when I was making videos for social media, I'm answering a lot of questions, and sometimes I'd have a thought, or I'd reference back to my notebook, and I'd be like, I think I'm going to share this today because it's always spoken to me. And this one is more, now that I'm in a role as a CFO and I'm writing a book on financial freedom, I just think it's so important not to get too caught up in money or in buying something. All of that is great. Enjoy it. I have no judgment for have as much money as you can get and buy as many things as you desire. That's cool. But don't get so caught up in them that they become what you love, because at the end of the day, they won't be there holding your hand on your deathbed. And I would tell the squadron that when I was in the Air Force, is that the Air Force won't be holding your hand on your deathbed. So don't sacrifice your family for one thing in the squadron. Show up when you're supposed to be here and give it 100%. And then go home when you're done and give your family 100% at that point. And so I think that's just a really important, the people who embrace others around them, their friends, their family, their circle, are so much happier later in life. And I think that's important.
I agree completely. So the other thing that you talked about that really resonated with me, so I have 20 grandchildren. And so when I think of my legacy and what I'm going and the lessons that I'm going to pass along to them, one of the most important is personal responsibility. And when you talk about personal responsibility, you talk about it is something that is incredibly important to you. Where did that come from?
I think there's a lot to it. So much of my philosophies on life are formed from an early age all the way through my life. As a fighter pilot, taking responsibility for your own airplane, your own actions is the key to success, because you're not going to become a good fighter pilot by blaming someone else. And so I think it's been ingrained in me for so many years. As a kid growing up, I do think my parents taught me that taking responsibility for what you do is an important aspect of life. And then it really got hammered in, as a fighter pilot in the Air Force. And it's something I try to teach my own kids, is that, one, nobody's coming to save you. Like, you are responsible for your own life. And everything we do in life is a decision. I spent a lot of years like kind of letting life happen to me. And, I really try to be proactive now. About everything I do is a decision, and every action I take is something I decide to do, which means I actually say no to a lot more now than I used to when I was younger, because it was just kind of happening. So taking responsibility for your actions includes, when you say, I don't have enough time for something, well, you always have enough time. It's just, this is not a priority. And when you say it that way, you're like, oh, yeah, that's true. This is not a priority. And it just comes across differently when you're framing it that way.
A single pilot operation and you turn around to blame somebody, there's nobody else sitting there.
Yeah, for sure. And if you make a mistake that is, a critical error, you could end up either swinging in a parachute or a smoking hole in the ground. And personal responsibility, your own life is on the line, and the lives of your element mates, your teammates. And if you're in combat and release a weapon, wherever that weapon goes is you're responsible for it as the pilot.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Okay. So, one final question before we start landing this airplane. How important are flight mentors? And then roll that over into life mentors.
Yeah. When I was probably at about my 16-year point in the Air Force or so, my wife and I hired our first coach, and it was her idea. I'll give her the full credit. Because I was a little skeptical. I was like, really, a coach? Like, we were starting a business, and we were doing some other things, and this coach really helped me a lot. First, by understanding that I don't know everything. As a fighter pilot, we're known to be a little bit cocky and a little bit like know-it-alls, right? And for a reason, we study really hard and we work really hard to be the best pilot, because we have to. But you do kind of develop this, like, I got this kind of mentality. But the best analogy he gave me was that Michael Jordan at his peak, right? He wins 6 championships, 6 rings in 7 years, I think it was. And he had a coach. Not only did he have a basketball coach, he had a mindset coach and a strength and conditioning coach. And to think about the greatest player of all time, really, in any sport, they had a coach at their peak. And if I think that I can do whatever this is better, then no one else can teach me anything, then I am not going to be the greatest of all time. And so I think that's true for life, for flying, for anything you're setting out to do. We take for granted that you're in high school sports and you have a coach, and maybe you play college sports and you have a coach. But you get out in the real world, and then you start working a job, and maybe you like it, maybe you don't. You're thinking about changing, but you're not really sure. Maybe you're taking flight lessons and you're like, do I want to make this a career? And you try to do it on your own. You try to make these decisions and think through it, and you're just kind of like fighting your way through it. But you never stop to think, maybe I should get a coach. And I'm not a coach, and I'm not selling coaching services. I have now had like 5 or 6 coaches over the last few years, and they have been phenomenal. And it has been so helpful for me. And so I take that concept to flying and think of it as a mentorship relationship, as a coach, as an instructor, whatever that role is. I think that there are always people out there who can teach us something. And I have so much left to learn, but I also think I have something to share. And, that's why I wrote the book, and why, I share stuff on social media. But I just think that coaching and mentoring is really understated in everything that we do.
That outside perspective, because you can't see what's right in front of you sometimes because you're looking somewhere else. So
you can't see when you're the problem.
all right. So tell our listeners how the best way to get in touch with you is, or to tune in, or to tune up, or to send you an email, or how do you want them to get in touch with you?
So I'm on all the major platforms. So Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube. And my handle is The Real Shawn Walsh. Or sorry, not the, it's just Real Shawn Walsh. And I post there every day, a video. I try to answer a lot of questions. As the page has grown, I have been overwhelmed with direct messages. And so on any given day, I have like hundreds of unread messages. So I hope no one takes offense when I don't get to all of them. I get through as many as I can. I really, at some point, I need like a staff or something to get through them and filter, because there's you get a lot of junk messages too on social media. That's part of it. And then I'll have a book coming out through Wiley Publishers this summer. And so we're working through the editing on that. And the title is still pending, but it's on financial freedom in the military. It applies to any, these lessons apply to anybody. It's financial lessons, it's life lessons. It's specifically written for an 18-year-old kid joining the military, but it applies to anybody. And I hope it turns out as
awesome.
Great.
So, Shawn, you have lived by any measure a really big life, and we are proud of you. We're grateful for your service to our country. But there is someone who's a champion in your background that had such an impact on your life that you can't help but say thank you to him right now. Who's that going to be?
I'm going to say my wife, Hillary. She is incredible. And the thing about our relationship is that we challenge each other in a really healthy and positive way, because we see the potential in each other. And so when I'm feeling down, or when I'm like, thinking about phoning this one in or whatever, she's there to challenge me and say, like, I know you, and I think you can do better than that. I think you're better than that. And I try to do the same for her. And so she is an incredibly successful businesswoman. She has the 11th fastest growing law firm in America over the last 5 years. And I'm happy to be, partnered with her on we have a few different businesses and things that we do here in Phoenix. And so she is definitely my champion, and I'm hers. And so that's who I would send my love and shout out to.
Hillary Walsh, we want to say thank you for being someone that Shawn Motor can count on. And this is my way of saying thank you to you, sir, for coming on the Grampian. We appreciate you. And again, thanks for your service to our country. And you keep having those Grampian-sized dreams and do something about it. So thanks for watching. This is Jim, and I am out. When you get an opportunity, subscribe or follow wherever you get your podcast.